Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, based on your time zone. Welcome in Salesforce Apex Hour. Today we have a special guest, Sarah Morgan, with us, and we are going to talk about extending Lightning-based component with the Lightning Web component. With that said, I will be hand over to Sarah for her introduction.
Hi, everyone. So as he just told you, we're talking about Lightning-based communities with LWC'c, Lightning Web Components. And just to give you a little information about me, I am a Salesforce Platform 2 developer. I also happen to have worked at Salesforce on the Trailhead team for a couple of years. I don't work there anymore. I left in 2019, but show you the agenda that we're going to kind of briefly cover today. And first thing is, well, why would you even want to use LWCs in a community? And that's a good question, because up until recently, they weren't really widely used, because a lot of people still had Visualforce-based communities. And that's why Visualforce is still very much relevant in the community ecospace, but that's becoming less and less so. We're also going to talk about developing multiple Lightning Web components that will communicate and how that works. And so we'll cover a little bit of that in the example that I'm going to be showing you. And then what needs to happen to configure those components to work in Experience Builder, specifically for communities. And then we're going to talk a little bit about working with Apex and the wire adapter. Was going to cover adding navigation to component, but I discovered right before this course started that actually there's a little problem that came out in spring 21 that we're going to have to deal with. But hopefully we're going to have time to cover Lightning Message Service and kind of bypass all that. So first thing is, why would you even want to use an LWC in communities? And hopefully, I'm assuming most of you, if you've joined this, are aware of what Lightning Web components are. And you probably already realize that they render much faster than Aura components. And that has to do with the way that they use standard web standards and not a abstraction layer like Aura components did. And that's part of what makes them run so much faster. So they are very good for that. And they really are the future of Salesforce development. I mean, Aura components are not being actively developed and added to at this point. All the emphasis that's going on in the development area of Salesforce is all triggered towards Lightning Web components. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense. But saying that, at this time, at least, you cannot use a Lightning Web component to build out a theme or a layout component. You still have to use an Aura component. And I actually cover that in the course on how to do that, because that is still the way it works. And that's kind of okay, because a theme and a layout component is something that is more about the visual representation. It's not usually going to access data. So performance is not so much of an issue with those. So in case you weren't aware of that. Oh, now we don't need that. We're going to go ahead and switch over to Visual Studio Code. And let me close all this. Can I move that? Okay. I'm going to close these real quick. And what I've done here is I have created a project, just an SFDX project. And I'm assuming you all know how to do that. It's just a regular standard project here that's been created. And I have copied in some data in order to load the particular org with some product data that I'll be using in this particular demo that I'm going to show you. And in case you're not familiar with that, this is a great way of loading a Scratch org. And I'm not going to actually be working with a Scratch org today. And the reason for that is because with Spring 21, what I discovered this morning is that they have changed completely the way you build up a community. It's actually in a totally different interface. It's now in the service setup and not in the regular setup like it was before. So we're going to go ahead and work with a Salesforce developer org that I have already loaded a community in. And therefore, we're not going to have that problem. So I will hopefully at the end of this course, by the way, or after this course has been recorded, spin up a GitHub repo that kind of walks you through how to do this on your own. So I wouldn't follow along with it today, especially since this is going to involve a lot of code. But where I'm getting a lot of this from the example that we're going to be walking through today was actually built out of the e-bikes repo. And I wanted to kind of briefly go over that and show you. And I think it's an excellent way for you to learn, and not only learn, but, and this is how you get to it, just from the developer website, you can go here to sample gallery, in case you've never seen this, as it comes up. And the one here specifically called e-bikes is really good when you're working with communities, because it definitely talks about integrating with Salesforce communities. Of course, they had a little bit of a typo here. Anyway, what it does is, it was kind of the basis, and what's important about working with these repos is they're constantly being changed and upgraded. So let's do this. Let's just open up the GitHub repo for this particular org. And as you'll see right here, the developer evangelists have actually updated this for the Spring 21 release 5 days ago. And that's good, because if you are learning and actually implementing your particular real world examples based on code from this, then you can be assured that you are using not only best practices, but you're using all the latest features. So that's why I think it's very important to constantly go back every release and pull down the latest org, the latest repo, and get that and go through it and make sure you are actually in your real world application implementing things correctly. So we're going to use that as an example today, kind of a modified example of what they have in this org. And let me switch back to our code. And I'm just going to kind of walk you through it a bit instead of trying to type out a very complex example and you have to watch me mistype about 1,000 times, because I'm human and that's what happens. So instead, our main thing that we're going to be working with here is a component called display products. And I'm going to pull up the HTML for that first and kind of walk through that and show you that at the very top, we have a conditional, which has to look to see if this particular property, search bar is visible, is true. And if it is, then it's going to show you a Lightning input box that will have a search key value that can be used to search for the products. And then there's another conditional below that that looks to see if there is any data in that product that's been returned. And if it is, then it'll have a for each loop that will go through. Sorry, people keep joining, and so I'm losing this. Okay, and then inside of that for each loop is another component called product tile. And this is what's called a nested child component. So the parent here is called display products and the child is product tile. Now I also have another nested component down here called Paginator. And this one I actually borrowed directly from the e-bikes repo and didn't alter it in any way because there's really no need to. It works very well. And if you do need to add any kind of pagination to a component, I would suggest you work with this component directly and just take the code directly from the repo to use it, because it's very well done. And then we have a few more conditionals down here at the bottom that just look to see if we actually have any products. And if there was no products returned from the search, then it's just going to give them a little message. And if there was an error that was returned, it's going to show that error. So that's all that we have here. Now let's look at the JavaScript, because that's where the real meat of your particular Lightning Web Component is. And in this particular example, and you can see it's very similar to the product tile list that was in that e-bike sample. We're doing a few things. We're importing the API and the wire up here. Of course, we have to import Lightning Element for any LWC component you create, but you don't have to do API and wire, but we're using those. And here you can see where we're using the API, and we're doing that to expose those particular properties that will be configurable for our community. And that will allow us to toggle on whether or not that search bar is visible or whether or not the tiles are draggable. We then have a few more little properties down here. And then we're loading the list of available products by using the wire adapter, which is the best way to do this because it uses the Lightning Data Service, which means it's automatically caching your data, which is a great thing. And that's part of what makes Lightning Web Components work so well. And we're sending in a couple of things, one for the filters and one for the page number. And that page number is specific for that, working with that paginator component, because it allows us to page through the results. And then we're handling a search key change. So anybody that puts in some information in that search key, it'll go ahead and convert that to a lowercase, get the page number, and send that off as an event. And then we're handling anything for that paginator component, such as that they want to go to the previous page or the next page. So that's all the JavaScript that we have here. And one other thing that's important to note is, and this has to do with configuring your component, you do that using the meta file. And in this particular case, I have a master label. I'm exposing it, by the way, as true. And if you go to create a new component, the first time you create it, like, let's just do that real quick, just in case nobody here has ever done that. Let's just create a Lightning component. We'll call it test. We'll enter it into the default directory. Once it creates, and we go here to the meta file, you'll notice that by default, all Lightning Web Components are set to FOSS. And this means they will not be exposed to Lightning App Builder or anything, Community Builder, anything you want to expose them to. They're going to be closed off. So that's something you need to be aware of. We're not really working with that one. So let's go back to display products right now and see it's set to true. I also put in a master label, and that's really important when you're working with Lightning App Builder or Experience Builder or any builder, that you want to put that master label in, because it gives a real meaningful label to what your component is doing. And you can also put a description here if you want, because that will show up as well in your Lightning App Builder or Experience Builder. But here we have the targets, and you can notice specifically we have one for Lightning community page and then community default. Now I've also added a third one to expose this just to a Lightning app page. I could also add a Lightning record page or something else. There's several targets that you can find, but I'm just exposing this. And one of the great things I think about working with Lightning Web Components, one of the big benefits, is that you can use them in your Lightning communities, or you can use them just in your regular Salesforce work or anywhere, because they're available through these different mechanisms. And I think that's the beauty of working with these components. They're so interchangeable. Now we have down here some target configs, and I have some specifically for exposed to the Lightning community, and that's that search bar is visible and the tiles are draggable. And that's part of why I had to, by the way, define those with that API property, because that's what makes them public properties. And I also have exposed them to a Lightning app page in case we wanted to use this particular component in a Lightning app page. Then we would be able to configure those particular properties. So now that I have that, let's go back here to the HTML, and you can see I have that product tile nested component. So let's look at what's involved with that one now that we've seen what's involved with the outer parent component. So in this child component, it's pretty simple. We just basically have that draggable property that allows us to drag those tiles back and forth. Of course, that's conditional if we select it. And then we also have an on click. So if somebody were to click on one of those tiles, something were to happen. And then we have an image of a picture. And then we also have something to display the name, the MSRP price, and then the currency, display that currency. So it's pretty simple information that we're displaying here. And if we look at the JavaScript here, the way I had set this up and the way I do this in this course is I was just going to have you, when you click on that tile, we were going to use the navigation mix-in, and we were going to, down here in the handle click, just navigate to a standard record page for that particular product that had been selected. And that's a good way of doing it. We're going to actually look at today a different way of doing this. Instead of using sending to a detail page, we're going to try to send that information to another component that will display it in what's called a Lightning card. So that's the next thing we're going to add. But you'll see we also have an API here that we're using, and that's because this is going to be a public property that'll be passed back to the parent in this case, because this is the child code that we're looking at. And in that, we also have two getters, a getter and a setter. And the get just gets that information. And then it also sets that information, which is the actual product and that picture URL, and then a name and the price, because that's what we display in the actual HTML template. And if you notice here, if I go to the configuration for this one, well, look at this. I do have a master label here, so it would be there, but I am not exposing this. Well, actually, this is exposed. Sorry, that must have been an example. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't actually be exposed here. Because it is a child, it will automatically inherit the exposed properties of the parent that it resides within. So it's not necessary for this to be exposed unless it was going to be independently used, which would make no sense for it to be independently used. So I'm gonna go ahead and save that. That was me experimenting with that, so apologize. And the Paginator component, I'm just gonna briefly go over it too. And this was borrowed completely directly from the e-bikes repo, as I said. It's a very efficient Paginator component. And as I said, I would really strongly urge you to work with it if you have any need to work with any pagination within a Lightning Web component of yourself, because it's been very well done, it's very efficient, and it handles things using a lot of best practices that are important to note. Okay, so, and as you'll see here for this one, it is of course exposed as FOSS because there would be no need to have drag on a paginator component that was not being used by another component or embedded within another component as a child. And that's the reason. Okay, so let's now that we have all this code, I'm going to go up here to Command Palette, and I keep getting this thing. Okay, go up to Command Palette, and we're going to just deploy this source to an org. And I've already set up the org, by the way. You can see that down here as the default org for this particular project. It's called Carved Rock. And all this does is just bring me to that Carved Rock developer org that I've already set up and loaded with products. So once we've deployed this, and one thing about Visual Studio, I will note, that's very important, and I love working with Visual Studio, is when you go to deploy this, if I had a mistake, like, let me give you an example. Let's just make a mistake here. We'll just take out this, oh, here, let's just do this. This is a really easy way to make a mistake. Instead of using the expression, we'll just accidentally put this around it. And of course, this is another good thing. You can see right away all these red squigglies that come up to tell me, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. You're not supposed to have elements like this. They're supposed to just have not the quotes around them. They're just supposed to have the expression syntax instead. So this wouldn't work. And if I went and I saved this, and then I tried to go back and deploy this source to the org, sorry, it takes a while. You should be getting an error. And that's one of the really good things about working with the SFDX tools, in case you haven't noticed this, because prior to using these developer tools, we wouldn't find out that we had a problem until we actually deployed it to wherever we wanted to deploy it to, then went and rendered it and tried to use it, then we would find out we had an error. But now you can find out you have an error before you even get that far, which is a good thing. So it's giving a very good message here, telling us that our valid identifier should remove the surrounding quotes. So it shouldn't have that. It should just have that expression string syntax. So I'm going to remove that back so we know it works. Save it. And another thing is you can also, instead of going up to View Command Palette, one nice thing about the SFDX tools is that you can actually deploy something specifically from. So if I just have this one thing, I don't have to deploy everything. I can just deploy this display products. And I can go down here using the context menu. God, it keeps taking me out. And deploy this to the org like that. So that's another method of doing it in case you weren't aware of that. I like that one better. It's really good when you start working with a project and you just have little changes that you're making. So we can see that that ran, and that's good. And now I can also go and open up this org by the command palette, and I'm going to open up the default org. We'll wait for that to load. And here you can see we're using Spring 21. And unfortunately, they did a lot of changes with Spring 21, I'm finding out. In fact, if you were to go watch my course right now, I would tell you in the course to find your community by going CO. Okay, this thing keeps popping up and messing me up. By doing this. But look what happens. I don't actually get that. I do get here instead digital experiences. And you're actually supposed to set this up from service setup, not from regular setup. But we can at least access a site if we've already set it up. We just can't enable a new community unless we go into service setup. So here I'm going to go to all sites. We've changed the verbiage. Instead of it being communities, they're calling everything sites. So it can be a portal, it could be a website, it could be a community, it could be anything. And that's the whole reason why they've changed the verbiage there. And they got rid of, hopefully you're aware of the fact that Community Cloud is no longer what they're using. It's now changed to Experience Cloud. And I was a little disappointed with that because we've been using Community Cloud for many, many years now, and everybody knows that and is very familiar with it. But marketing decided to change it to Experience Cloud because they see it as a whole different way of experiencing. So here we have 4 different, in this particular org, 4 different communities or sites that have been set up. And one is the one that I use in that course, and we're going to go ahead and look at that one. So I'm going to just open this up with Builder, and it's going to load up Experience Builder. Okay, and once that loads, you can see I've actually already dragged this in, but let's just delete that real quick so you can see how we get it. If I go back up here to components and I scroll down, you'll notice if you've ever used Lightning App Builder and not Experience Builder, you'll be surprised the first time you do to see there's a lot more components that are available to Experience Builder that are not available in Lightning App Builder. And that's part of the beauty of working with Experience Builder, because you have a lot of access to standard components that you can utilize, and you don't actually have to create custom components in a lot of cases. In fact, if you are considering building your own custom component for Lightning Web for a community, I would instead make sure you have looked at all the standard components that are available first, because it's very, very likely that they already have a standard component available that will accomplish what you need to do. And there is absolutely no reason to go create your own component, custom component, if there's already a standard one available to you, unless you have some need to customize it beyond what the standard component allows. So here we have a custom component called Display Products. And the reason we do is because I went into that meta file and I exposed it specifically to Community Builder, to Experience Builder. So I'm going to drag it now right up here above the content. Did it? I think it took. Let's try that again. Come on. Okay, maybe it'll go now. There it is. Okay, so I put it into, well, I don't want to put it there. I want to put it below. So let's move that back down. I want to put it right there. Into that. There it goes. Okay, so now we have it right here in this section of the community. And it's displaying a list of products that I've already loaded up into this org. And also notice over here, it's showing me all those target configs that I had exposed in that meta file. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one to make that search bar visible. And here it goes. It automatically pops up in Experience Builder. I haven't even rendered this, but it renders automatically in Experience Builder. And now I can't actually type in anything into this, but what I can do is close this, and then I can publish this. And once it's been published, I can then go to preview. And once I go into preview, now I actually have a rendered version of this new display products component. And if I type here something like kayak, well, it automatically does what it needs to show that. And now I haven't showed you, unfortunately, we're going to go back to the code, because one thing I did not show you at this point was how did all that data work? Like what drove that? And it's actually Apex that drove it. And I'm going to close all of these and show you instead. We're going to go up to where the classes are. And here you can see I have a class called Product Controller. And if I pull this open, I have the code for that product controller. And the first thing it has in here is an inner class, and that's for those filters. And right now I only have one particular thing in here in this array, but I could have multiple ones. Now I also have a paged result. And if I go here to the definition, you'll see, well, there's no definition for that paged result. And that's because I haven't copied that into this particular one. So I'm going to have to go get that. So let me grab the code for that real quick, and then we're going to create that up. So you'll see how that works. Sorry, guys. Okay, here it is. So let's, instead from here on classes, I'm going to right click and use that context menu, and we're going to create an Apex class. We're going to call it paged results. Oops. Paged result. And we'll just put it in the default directory. And I'm just going to show you the code that I have here. It's very simple. We're just sharing out a few properties here. And this, we're getting the page size, the page number, total item count, and then of course all the records that are being returned. And this is useful for formatting it in a way that can be used and consumed by that paginator component. So that's the whole reason for using this particular class. And then if we go back to the product controller, you can see that that's what we have here. And now if I go to the definition, it's going to bring me right into that class. So I'm going to save this and then go back to product controller. And you'll see that we're passing in the filters and the page number. And then we are, the first part of it is we're basically have a conditional here to look to see if that search key is empty. And if it's not, then we're going to build out part of the where statement that will be used in a SQL statement that we're going to be executing later. Now this code right here is really used for that paginator, and it's to get all the information that's needed in that paginator in order for it to work properly, which is the page size, the page number, and the total item count. And it computes it up here too. And then we go down, the last thing we do is we're basically going to build out the rest of that SQL query to get the ID, the product code, family, name, the price, and that picture URL, along with a description from the product to standard object. And also I want you to make sure you notice this particular part of the clause that's being built, and that's the with security underscore enforced. This is something that was just released, I think, less than a year ago, possibly. And what it does is, by default, Apex classes, in case you're not aware of this, do not enforce any sharing rules or field level security. So it is your responsibility to add that, unless you use this for a SQL query. You can actually add this right here in there, and then it automatically enforces all that sharing for you. We also have an order by clause, and we're limiting by the page size and offset. And this again is something that's used by that paginator component. And then of course, we're just returning that page result. So that's the Apex that kind of goes behind all of this and drives what's happening here. And let's go back now to here. And we're going to just click on one of these. And unfortunately, we're getting an error here. And this is something that I just discovered this morning, and I'm going to have to figure out exactly why, because it was something that didn't happen until Spring 21 was released just a few days ago. So we have a little bit of a breaking change, and nobody's reported it yet, so I'm going to have to figure it out. But I promise I will, and I promise I will be, once I get the resolution, putting out a GitHub repo as well as a fix to the course to make sure this does work. But in the meantime, we're going to try something by going back to the code to get around that. And instead of having it navigate directly to a standard detailed page, we're going to try something different. We're going to add in a new component here. And we're going to call it, so we're going to create a Lightning Web component in our LWC folder, and we're going to call it product card. And just save it to the default folder. And then luckily I have already built out the code for that. So I'm going to copy that in for you and then walk you through this. So you can see what this is doing. Okay, so for the HTML, the markup, let me get rid of this so we have a little more space here. Okay, up at the top, we're just formatting all this into a Lightning card. And then we have a few conditionals to see if there's a record ID. And if there is, then we're displaying the product name. And then we're getting that picture URL so that we can actually access a nice, pretty picture. And then we're actually using a standard-based Lightning component called Lightning Record View Form here, which is very nice because it makes it a lot easier to display data and consume it, as opposed to doing all this without the Apex. And in this case, it's okay because we don't need it. And all of that sharing and everything is handled for us automatically. And we don't actually have to create Apex for this particular component. So sometimes you can get away with using it without. And this is one of those examples. And then at the bottom, we just have a little conditional that has a placeholder value that tells us to select a product to see the details. And then we're just displaying all the details as output fields, the family, the product code field, the MSRP, and the description. So it's basically a way of getting more information displayed than what is available in that tile, because the tile, only has the price and the name, and that's it. That's all that's being displayed there, and a little picture. But we want more information. So now let's go to the JavaScript for this product card. And this is where it's going to get a little more complicated because we're going to be using a thing called Lightning Message Service. And for anybody that's been working, I'm just going to replace all this code, with Lightning Web Components from the very beginning, you may or may not be familiar with what Lightning Message Service is. And that is because Lightning Message Service is something that just came out about a year ago, I think. And when Lightning Web Components were first released, they didn't have this available to them. They instead had to use a thing called PubSub, which was basically a library that the Salesforce developer evangelist created specifically to handle inter-component communication. So basically you have two components that are not nested within each other. So they're like sibling components and they're not related. And you need some way for them to communicate. Well, because of the way Lightning Web Components work with a shadow DOM, you can't do that unless you have some mechanism underneath to allow it. So this is what Lightning Message Service was put out to do. And one of the benefits of it is the fact that it not only works in Lightning, but it allows you to work across all the platforms. So it can be used in multiple places to handle communication. So it's much better than the PubSub. And if you are, for some reason, using PubSub, I would suggest you look into using Lightning Message Service instead, because it really is the way that you should be handling component communication between sibling components. Okay, so what we have here, and the way Lightning Message Service works is you have to use a message context, and you have to actually have what's called a message channel. And I don't have a message channel in this particular product, I don't think. No, I don't. So we're going to actually have to copy that in from another project. And the way you do this is you actually have to create, I'm going to copy this in, a folder that's not already there. Paste it in. Paste it in here. It's got to be at the root. So there. Here we are. So now we have it. Is it at the root? Let me see. No, it's within. This is one thing that's kind of frustrating about working with. Oh wait, no. I'm sorry. I had that wrong. Actually, it can be in here in the LWC folder. Okay, so what we have is a message channel folder. And in here, you just have some XML, and it defines that we have two particular ones. One's for product selected, one for product filtered. And I actually don't need this product filtered. And the reason why is because I don't have, as opposed to the e-bikes example, I don't have a product filter component that I'm also going to be working with. We're just going to be working with the product card at this point. So this product filter one is not necessary, but the product selected one is. And you'll see that what it does is it has a master label to say that it's a product selected. It has a description. And then it's telling you specifically what field is going to be passed in this message channel. And in this case, it's going to be the product ID. And it even has a description here to say, select the product ID. So that's how the Lightning message service knows to work with it. So let's go back now to the product card. And we can see that here I have an import of that product selected message from the Salesforce message channel product selected. And that's what I have here. And there's a very specific naming that you have to use when you're working with message channels. It has to be the name product selected, and then it has to have message channel / meta XML in order for it to work. You have to use a very specific naming convention here. So let's go back in here. But notice there's something interesting about working with this is that you'll notice here at the very end, the product selected message gets from product selected with an __C. And that kind of looks like it could be a field or an object name, but it's not. It has nothing to do with fields or objects. The message channel is completely separate from that, but it uses the same naming convention. So it's just kind of a caveat I wanted to point out to you if you do happen to work with Lightning Message Service. And we're actually using the UI record API here because we're using that Lightning record form based component. And this is an easier way of working with data in Salesforce in your Lightning Web Component. And then we're also getting the schema. And that's so we can specifically know what that name field is, the product code field, the family field, the MSRP, description field, and picture URL. And one of the good things about working with a schema is that it gives you that referential integrity that you wouldn't have otherwise. So if for some reason you had an admin, a Salesforce admin, they went into the product to table and they changed one of these fields to not be named product code. Let's say they did product code something. Well, then when you went to compile this code and deploy it, you would actually get an error at the time you tried to deploy it, as opposed to finding out about it only after. So you would know about it before you actually got to the point where you had rendered something into production and then find out you have an error. So that's another one of the good things about working with SalesforceDX. Okay, down here we have some more code that is loading the context for that Lightning message service. And that's something that has to be done in order to work with it. We're also setting up a subscription for that particular product selected Lightning message. And then here in the connected callback, which is something that all Lightning Web Components can work with, we're subscribing to that product selected message. And then you can see here in the message, we're actually sending off from the message that product ID, because as you recall, when we looked at that product selected, that is the field that needs to be passed. So here, let's go back here. And then also what we have, oh, no, went to the wrong one. product card. We also have a handle record loaded. And what this does is it just gets the records, looks at the detail, and then specifically extracts out particular values that it needs, which is that product name and the picture URL. And then here we have a handler that's set up to handle the product that was selected. And then also we can navigate to the record. And this is something that happens within the product card. So we're going to then, to make all this work, have to get rid of some of the code that we had already in that product tile. So I'm going to go back, I'm going to kind of reduce this so you can see. Okay, so let's go back to product tile. And this is going to have to change in order for all of this to work. So what I'm going to have to do is, instead of having this, and I'm sorry, I'm grabbing this from a different project. So give me a second. I'll make sure I'm grabbing the right code. Okay, here we go. Okay. I apologize, I'm sorry. I wasn't planning on doing this part of the demo, so I wasn't quite as prepared for this. I'm trying to find where I built this out in a different project. I found it now. Sorry about that. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this product tile component. And right now, if I look at the JavaScript, you can see it uses that navigation mix-in. And it also does, in the handle click, it does a navigate. Well, we don't want to use that because it was giving us an error. So instead, I'm going to replace all of this with some other code that in basically the biggest difference is here in the handle click. Instead of using that navigation mix-in, we are going to just use a regular custom event that is named selected and handles and hands off that product ID to the parent component, which in this case is display products. Okay, so I have that, I needed that, but I also need to make another change here back into display products. So I need to go back, first of all, to the JavaScript for this. And there's some other stuff we're gonna have to add to make this work. Oh, I'm sorry, am I going over too long? Was that somebody trying to stop me?
No, please go ahead.
Okay, okay. Sorry, I wasn't able to kind of set this up in advance. I had to kind of do this on the hop. Okay. So the changes I need to make here in order to make this work with Lightning Message Service is to add in, yeah, okay. It's actually some of the same code that I have in the Lightning card. So right up here, I'm going to add in some code to get that Lightning Message Service, comment that, to get that product selected message from that message channel, and also to work with the Lightning Message Service. So I need that. I'm also going to need some code under here to work with that Lightning message service, load that context for it. And it also uses that @wire method, by the way, in case you didn't notice that. We will keep this loading of the list of available products because that stays the same. That's working with the Apex controller. That has not changed with whether or not we use Lightning message service. But we need to also add some code that will actually publish this method. So I'll put that, let's see, we'll put it under here. And just need to uncomment this. Okay, and we have a handle product selected. And this is going to actually publish that message. And that's the way Lightning message service works. And then here, their handle product selected. Instead of doing the publish here, we're going to do this a little different way because we're already doing it there. We're going to just change that record ID to be the product ID. So I'm going to remove this code and instead just set that record ID as the product ID because all of this is going to be handled essentially instead of the custom event, it's going to be handled with that Lightning message service. And then the rest of it should remain the same. So I think I have everything I need. Let's go find out. We're going to save all my changes. And then we're going to push this to the org. Well, let's do it a different way. Let's just push it like this from the context menu. I'm going to deploy the source to my carve.org. And if we have any errors, we're going to find out about it right away, which is good. Oh, yep, we did have some errors. Something got missed. Unexpected file found in selected. Found in package. Okay. I think maybe I did have it in the wrong place. No, it should be in the right place. Sorry, we're having to figure this out on the fly. What's wrong here? I don't need this message channel. I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of this one. This might be what's messing it up because we're not using that message channel. We're just using the product selected message channel at this point. Yes. Okay, and let's make sure I've got all of this right. Let's see.
And one more thing, like you added that messaging channel inside the LWC folder. It should be outside.
It should be.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure. That's what I thought. But then I was looking at another project where I had it inside. But that's probably what it is. Okay. Yep. Let me move this out then back out to here.
Here.
Yeah, here. That's where I need to use it. Move. Yes. So let's do that. I think that is your problem. So thank you for adding that. That's what I thought at first, but then I was looking at something else that had something different that was probably a mistake. So let's just go to save all again, and let's try that push again, and this will probably work. So thank you for chiming in there and reminding me about that. Here, let's go back up to.
I'm not sure that the spelling should be the same or not, but it should be message channels. S should be there. I'm not sure. It can be issue, but yeah.
What? I'm sorry, what's that last part you said about message channel?
Yeah, in the message channel, the name should be message channels. S should be there after channel. The folder name should be message channels.
Oh, you're right. It should. It might make a difference. Let's find out. We're gonna deploy, and let's see if it doesn't work. We'll try that. Okay, that might have been it. Let's see what message it's giving us here. File name mismatch with class name. Oh, look, that was just an accident. Look, I accidentally named this page result without the T. This is wrong. So let's just No, not delete. Rename. That was just a typo. That needs to be page result and not that. Okay, so let's try this again. And saved. Okay. Go back up here. Deploy source. One thing I like is they do give you very good error messages in the output. It usually tells you what you did wrong. And it's usually something stupid like you just forgot the T, and minor misspelling is usually what's caused the problem. Okay, but we still have an issue. Let's scroll down and see expected filelet path. It is there. Use the following component paths. Remove. Well, that's the problem.
You also need to change metadata file.
Well, the meta file was for
Yeah, this page. Can you click on Apex classes? There's a metadata file as well.
The meta file for the class?
Yes.
Okay.
That also missing T. Yep.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It is. Thank you. All right. There you go. All right. So save that. And let's try it again. The beauty of producing courses for Pluralsight is I can edit all this stuff out. All these little minor mistakes that happen when I'm recording the course. But unfortunately, you guys, since this is live, you get to see it all happen, because this is what really happens in the development world. So this is, another message. You can't remove, I don't know what it's talking about. You can't remove the Lightning community page from targets for product card. Let's see. Product card was the new one that I added in. Did it have it at one point? It may have had it. I may have added it at one point, and then because it's trying to push over, you know what we can do? I think we can just publish over. If we go here, and can't we do a deploy with override? No, we can do that with a push. We can't do that with a deploy. Okay. So I'm going to have to go back and make this change here. Obviously, at one time, probably through experimentation, I had, yeah, that's what happened. I had added the product card so that it could be used somewhere else.
It might be like you added this component in the community.
Yeah, I added the component like this at one time, pushed it, but now when it's trying to override it, it can't, because you can't remove it. And that's one of the things that's a good thing to be aware of, guys, is if you make a meta configuration file change and then you try to change it and override it to something less, you can add stuff, but you can't remove stuff. Once you've done it, you'll have to like delete the component completely and then start all over again. That's unfortunately, I don't know if that's some kind of caching issue they have internally, but I have noticed that. That is very kind of frustrating with the configuration. So let's try this again. Now that I have it the way it's expecting it to be. And go back up here and we'll try deploying it again. Let's see if this works. I apologize, we're going over. Is that a problem? That we're going a little over time?
We are good.
We're good? Okay. I wasn't expecting all these problems, obviously. But you're getting to see what development is like in the real world. Because this happens to everybody. Okay, did it work? Yes, it did. It worked. Okay, so now let's go back to our org. And oh, this is going to be cached, I know. So let's just, that's another thing. Experience Builder will cache it. If you make a change, you got to just get out of it and go right back into it. So let's go back into it, because you will not be able to see your changes just by refreshing Experience Builder, has been my experience. Caching is wonderful, but it can also be frustrating at times. Because it makes you think that something you just fixed didn't really get fixed when it actually did. It's just cached. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add this new component, product card. So let me scroll down, and why isn't it not there? It should be there because I exposed it. Okay. Did we miss something with that? Did I not save it maybe? Let's go back down to product tile. No, not product tile, product card. That's right. Okay, it's, oh, is exposed FOSS. See? True, needs to be true. So even if you have all the targets set up, if that is exposed, is not set to true, you're not going to see it. Okay, let's try it one more time. It is so slow running this deploy. But I understand why it's slow, because it's got to do all this validation checking. So it's kind of understandable. It's not just pushing a bunch of code. There's a bunch of stuff that has to run behind the scenes to make sure that the code is actually okay. All right, and once again, let's get out of here and go back into it. Go back to components, and hopefully we're going to have that product tile or product card at the very bottom here. Yes, there we are. Yay! So let's move it over here to put it right above. I hate that it doesn't, you got to get it just right. There it goes. Okay. And you see it automatically shows select a product to see the details. So hopefully if I do this, I'm going to see the details. Oh, crap. Something's not working. Okay, do y'all want to sit here and debug this, or should we just end this up and I'll tell you that I will get this fixed at some point? What do you think, Amit? Because I know we've gone
just go into the preview mode. I guess it will work in preview mode.
Oh, that's right. We're not in preview mode. Good point. Good point. And let me publish it too. Good point. That always tricks me. I forget about that. No, I'm still getting an error. Okay, product ID is not defined. It is, but there's obviously something that didn't go right. So let's see if we can fix it real quick. We might. It might not be as hard as we think. So it's telling me that product, oh, let me go back to that error. I want to see if it gave me more information about where it's, oh, it's in the Aura prod. That's not really telling me anything. That's not very helpful. Okay, let's go back to the code and see if we can figure out what went wrong here. So in the product card, we're dealing with that product ID. We're handling it here. And handle product selected. Here we go. So I'm getting the product ID here. That should be right. What else could be missing here? And then here we're passing the product ID in the handle product selected, and that's the handle product selected. So that should be right. And we're doing the product selected. This all looks right to me.
Can you go to the messaging channel?
Yeah, let's go look. Maybe we made a mistake in the messaging channel. Let's go look. Okay, we're calling it product ID. That's right.
If you don't mind, can you rename this folder name messaging channels? Just add S and redeployed it. Just parent folder name.
Right here.
Yes.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yes. Just add and now deployed it again.
Okay, let's try that. Okay. Get rid of all these. Close all. Easier to get to. Okay. Okay, we ran. All right, let's go back and let's just try it. Oh, wait, preview. I forget when you do refresh, it goes back to preview. No, product ID is not fine. I'm gonna have to debug this. I'm gonna have to go through Lightning app, the tools and try to see if I can find out where it's actually debugging. And I don't think we really want to go through that since we're way over. What do you think at this point?
We should be fine. Sorry for the technical glitch, everyone. It's a live project. We will share the updated code repository that you can try at your end.
Okay, so yes, sorry guys. I wish we could have gotten this working, but what should happen is that I should click this on, and then over here in this component, I should see that rendered version of the Lightning record. And it would show me all the information, including the description and the other information in a nice format. So unfortunately, we had a little snag here, and I will, though, I promise, be figuring out what the problem is after I debug this for a little while and creating a repo, which I'm assuming will be shared with everybody. And you can then download all the code and walk through it on your own.
So one small thing, like somebody added into a chat window. Let's last try. If that will work, we are good. Otherwise, we'll stop here. So can you go back to your messaging channel?
Yep.
Somebody posted in the chat window. Might be we overlook. So it is saying is expose equal to false. Can you make it true?
Ah! That is probably exactly what it is. Good catch, whoever saw that.
Thank you so much. Somebody posted in the chat from the chat window.
This particular property has tripped me up more times than I can think. So it is one of those common mistakes that I think we all make. So
thank you everyone for being an active participant.
Yes.
Everyone is looking into the code. Thank you for helping.
Yeah, this is good. It's kind of like group debugging. It's amazing how little tiny changes like this can just make the whole thing not work. But that's what makes development fun, isn't it? And challenging and exciting. Okay, so it ran. Let's go back and we'll try it again. We may have a caching issue too. That could have been it. We might have to get back out because I have noticed that in the Experience Builder quite often, that my changes don't get reflected unless I rebuild. Okay, let's try that. Let's just go in and try reopening the builder, just in case there was a caching problem that was causing that. And go to preview. Nope, we're still getting it. So there's something.
That might be a small issue, but more or all, we are good here.
Yeah, it's probably a very small issue, and I wish I could find it right now, this second, but unfortunately, these things tend to be a little tricky. But I promise I will find this out. I will create a GitHub repo that Amit can share with you guys afterwards, and you'll be able to walk through, and I'll probably try to set it up to where you can do all this maybe in a Scratch org instead of having to do it in your own Salesforce developer community. That might be more helpful. So, okay, so I wish we could have done this perfect, but this is what's called live development, and it doesn't always work perfectly. So I'm hoping that some of you learned something from this today and that it was helpful to you. And thank you for coming. And thank you for all your helps.
Thank you, Sarah. So